introduce my next speaker, Roger Stone. I'd like to go a flashback here and read a letter on behalf of President Donald J. Trump. This letter is dated July 10th, 2020. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive grant of clemency, commuting the unjust sentence of Roger Stone, Jr. Roger Stone is a victim of the Russian hoax that the left and its allies in the media perpetrated for years in an attempt to undermine the Trump presidency. There was never any collusion between the Trump campaign or the Trump administration with Russia. Such collusion was never anything other than a fantasy of partisans unable to accept the results of the 2016 election. The collusion delusion spawned endless and pharisaical investigations conducted at a great taxpayer expense, looking for evidence that did not exist. As it became clear that these witch hunts would never bear fruit, the special counsel's office resorted to process-based charges leveled in high-profile people in an attempt to manufacture the false impression of criminality lurking below the surface. These charges were the product of recklessness born of frustration and malice. This is why the out-of-control Mueller prosecutors, desperate for splashy headlines to compensate for a failed investigation, set their sights on Mr. Stone. Roger Stone is well known for his nearly 50 years of work as a consultant for high-profile Republican candidates, including President Ronald Reagan, Senator Bob Dole, and many others, and of course Richard Nixon. He is also well known for his outspoken support for President Donald J. Trump in opposition to Hillary Clinton. Mr. Stone was charged by the same prosecutors from the Mueller investigation tasked with finding evidence of collusion with Russia. Because no such evidence exists, however, they could not charge him for any collusion-related crime. Instead, they charged him for his conduct during their investigation. The simple fact is that if the special counsel had not been pursuing an absolutely baseless investigation, Mr. Stone would not be facing time in prison. In addition to charging Mr. Stone with alleged crimes arising solely from their own improper investigation, the Mueller prosecutors also took pains to make a public and shameful spectacle of his arrest. Mr. Stone is a 67-year-old man with numerous medical conditions who had never been convicted of another crime. Rather than allow him to surrender himself, they used dozens of FBI agents with automatic weapons and tactical equipment, armored vehicles, and an amphibious unit to execute a pre-dawn raid of his home where he was with his wife of many years. Notably, CNN cameras just magically were present to broadcast these events live to the world, even though they swore they were not notified. It was just a coincidence that they were there together with the FBI early in the morning. Not only was Mr. Stone charged by overzealous prosecutors, pursing a case that never should have existed, and arrested in an operation that never should have been approved, but there was also serious questions about the jury in the case. The forewoman of his jury, for example, concealed the fact that she is a member of the so-called liberal resistance to the Trump presidency. And now deleted tweets, the activist juror vividly and openly attacked President Trump and his supporters. Mr. Stone, like every American, deserved a fair trial. At this time, however, and particularly in light of the egregious facts and circumstances surrounding his unfair prosecution, arrest, and trial, the President has determined to commute his sentence. Roger Stone has suffered greatly. He was treated very unfairly, as were many others in this case, but Roger Stone is now a free man. Everybody, welcome Roger Stone.
very much. Please, sit down. Thank you. Wow, what an amazing crowd. I can't wait to hear what I have to say. Look, I'm not going to kid myself. Half of you came to hear what I had to say. The other half came to see, what the hell is he going to wear? I am able to be with you tonight solely because of a courageous act of clemency in which the President of the United States, on the basis of both mercy and justice, commuted my sentence because I was the last victim of a political prosecution that never should have happened. We now know, on the basis of declassified documents that were ultimately released because of the heroic efforts of Rick Grinnell, who was serving as the acting DNI director, that the entire Mueller investigation had no legal basis, that there was no evidence of collusion between the Russian state and the Trump campaign. This was just the first of 3 efforts to undo the results of the 2016 election. I don't want to dwell on the past tonight. I want to talk about the future. But before I do that, I want to congratulate Jim Putin on his victory and wish him the very best in his race against Congressman Ted Douche. This guy, Congressman Deutsch, is one of the most odious con men, one of the worst hucksters since, I don't know, Adam Schiff. As recently as a hearing in which, well, you really couldn't call it a hearing, Attorney General Barr appeared before the House Judiciary Committee, where members were allowed to stand up, make mini speeches, and then cut him off from answering their questions. But during that process, Ted Deutsch misstated, distorted, and lied about the facts regarding my case, my sentencing, and the process of my commutation repeatedly. Now, I'm kind of used to this because the Senate Intelligence Committee released their report late last week, just in time for the 2016 election, and they once again recycled the same completely debunked false narrative regarding Russian collusion and the Trump campaign. And specifically, when it came to me, they said that although Roger Stone denied ever discussing WikiLeaks or the WikiLeaks releases with candidate Trump, and although President Trump, in his written answers to Special Counsel Mueller, said that he had no recollection of having discussed the WikiLeaks disclosures with Roger Stone, we have assessed that Stone had multiple conversations with the president regarding the WikiLeaks disclosures. Assessed. That's the word that the intelligence agencies use when they have a theory that they have no evidence or proof whatsoever of. And that is the case here. They also assessed that there were multiple contacts between the Russian state and the Trump campaign. So they're telling us that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is really run by the Vice Chairman, Mark Warner, from Virginia, a man who should be prosecuted for leaking the Carter Page FISA application, was able to learn things that Robert Mueller, with full subpoena power and an unlimited budget and a platoon of left-wing, angry Democrat lawyers, could not find. The entire Senate Intelligence Committee report is a joke. It is recycled bullshit. For those of you who want to read about this in greater detail, I just posted a piece at stonecoldtruth.com, my website, where, as I think most of you know, for over 16 months, I was unconstitutionally gagged from posting or saying anything in public. How can this happen in America? My trial was a Soviet-style show trial in which the judge prohibited every powerful line of defense. I couldn't argue that Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Orr, Rosenstein, McCabe, Hillary all lied to Congress, but they weren't prosecuted. But they lied about material matters. They lied about consequential matters, substantial matters. They lied to cover other underlying crimes. Any misstatement that I made in my voluntary appearance before the House Intelligence Committee was completely innocuous. There was no underlying crime to hide. We now know definitively precisely what happened. The prosecutors working for Mr. Mueller went to a number of judges and magistrates and said, we have evidence of Roger Stone committing treason, espionage, conspiracy against the United States, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering of millions of rubles into campaign donations in violation of the Foreign Campaign Contributions Act, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. They had a list of 18 crimes. They got full access to all my emails, all my text messages, all my phone calls, all of my records, and they could find no evidence of any of those crimes. They could find no evidence of Russian collusion. They could find no evidence of WikiLeaks collaboration. They could find no evidence, this is one of their favorites, that I knew about the WikiLeaks obtaining and publishing John Podesta's emails in advance of their publication. So I was charged with the fabricated crimes of lying to Congress. But I couldn't argue that all those Democrats had lied to Congress. I was also, interestingly enough, prohibited from raising in my defense the misconduct of the Special Counsel's Office, the FBI, the Department of Justice, or any member of Congress, Adam Schiff. You see what happened here is the prosecutor took the fruits of his investigation, took my emails, sent them to Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff crafted a series of gotcha questions, most of which, all of which was innocuous, hiding no underlying crimes. I, of course, tripped on these innocuous questions. Then, in violation of House rules and the law, Adam Schiff sent my classified testimony back to the special counsel, where Andrew Weissman cobbled together an indictment. And they said that we could not randomly select the judge, that my case was related to the case of the 17 Russians they said had hacked the DNC. A case that hasn't come to trial, a case in which there is no discovery, but a case in which the special counsel promised that they would introduce evidence from that case in my case, which of course they didn't, meaning they defrauded the court. That is how I ended up in front of Judge Amy Berman Jackson. I'm not going to comment on that. In any event, this has been a horrific ordeal, but the left-wing line of the day, just so you're familiar with it, is Roger Stone traded his silence for clemency in his case. Silence about what? No. Roger Stone refused to fold to the pressure on July 14th of 2019 when the Mueller prosecutors proposed to my lawyers that I cooperate, that I re-remember, that I would come clean, that I should confess that 29 phone conversations between myself and candidate Trump in 2016 had been about coordinating with the Russians the WikiLeaks disclosures, which never happened, and I refused to fold like a chair. So it was in this very room, just nights ago, when history was made. I was up on this very platform. I was backstage with Laura Loomer's major contributors. I didn't know whether to come out and give my remarks in Yiddish or English. Laura Loomer and I have been friends for a long time. back to her days as an investigative reporter with Project Veritas. She is a woman of enormous strength. She's a woman of enormous courage. She's a woman of enormous spirit. She is indefatigable. She is brave. And it is essential that people understand that Lois Frankel is about to be rumored. Is more than that. She is the new face of the Republican Party. Not the old country club Republican Party of yesterday, but the party of working people, the party of constitutional liberty, the party of freedom, and the party that will stand up against the evils of Islamic terrorism. The analogy that I used standing right here the other night was she was the Joan of Arc of the conservative movement. But another analogy comes to mind. Just as the Bible tells us that Esther saved Israel from complete annihilation, Laura Loomer will help save America from annihilation. Now, instead of talking about where we are going, I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. You see, 2016 was the year in which the mainstream media lost their stranglehold on political discourse in this country. Up until then, political narrative in this country was controlled by 3 television networks, 2 cable news networks. In the 70s, it was controlled by a series of national news magazines that are no longer with us. But it is still a fact that the rise of a vibrant, robust, alternative media based in the internet allowed for the election of a brash outsider from New York who dared greatly to challenge the status quo. Donald Trump was written off and underestimated by the political establishment in this country, by the 2-party duopoly who, working together over the last 30 years, has given us endless war, where our inherent national interests are not clear, but where we are spending treasure and blood. The erosion of our civil liberties, where the Director of Intelligence can say to the Congress, oh no, there's no keeping of microdata on the American people. Yet where is General Clapper now after lying to Congress under oath? Well, he's teaching ethics at Vermont College and he's a commentator for CNN. They have given us immigration policies that punish the people who want to come here legally and wait in line for the promise of a better life in America, while rewarding those who come here illegally with benefits and rights they do not deserve, at the same time making our communities and our streets less safe. They've given us international, one-size-fits-all, omnibus trade pacts that are great for our trading partners, but have sucked the jobs out of America. They have given us fiscal policies that leave us deep in debt and tax rates that are confiscatory, that discourage the small businessman, the small businesswoman, and the entrepreneur. They have run the country into the ground, and then in 2016, the times met the man. Donald Trump came along at the very last minute to save this country from hurtling over the cliff to globalism, and God bless him for it. 40 years. He did not run for president because of the glory and honor of the office. He did not run for president because he needed a bigger house or a better plane. He already had those. He didn't run for president so he could make money. In fact, this job has cost him a couple $2 billion off of his net worth. He didn't run because he wanted to be well known. He was the best known business person on the face of the planet. He ran, ladies and gentlemen, because he loves this country and he could not bear to see what was happening to it. As the president said, we don't win anymore, and it is time for America to win again. The experts, the pointy-headed intellectualoids of the fake news media insisted that America's greatest days were behind us. They insisted that for structural reasons, we had to, as a country, accept a back seat in the global economy. Just face up to the fact that America will not be a leader anymore, that we can no longer be number one. And Donald Trump refused to accept that. And yes, Barack Obama, he did wave the wand of tax reduction, the wand of regulatory reduction, the wand that encourages business to expand, to bring jobs here. He renegotiated our trade agreements, and he brought us the greatest job growth in our history, the greatest wage growth in our history, and the highest levels of employment among every subset of Americans, including African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women, and so on. It was a miracle. Now, the president's critics and his opponents, who never accepted the results of the 2016 election, who wasted 3 years of the public's time and the taxpayers' money on the Russian collusion hoax, then pivoted to the hastily assembled Ukrainian collusion hoax, except for they bumped into Joe Biden when they got there. Now they seek to benefit from the fallout of what is a legitimate health crisis in this country. Now, the president, in my view, had no choice but to err on the side of caution. He's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, and he's not a politician. He's a political leader. There's a big difference. And in order to protect the public health, he had no choice but to close down one of the most vibrant economies in the world, perhaps the most vibrant economy we have ever had. Now his critics seek to profit politically from that. Thank God the projections of the scientists and the doctors were wrong, but we had no way of knowing. The president acted responsibly, and he stopped flights from China because it is China, not Russia, that is the #1 enemy of this country on the face of the planet. They import deadly viruses to us. They manipulate our currency. They steal our copyrighted material. They cheat. They are the greatest danger in the world. And it is extraordinary and just coincidental that they just happened to pay Joe Biden's son $1.4 billion. A guy who's never managed a dollar in his life. That's quite a payoff. So how can we believe there's nothing untoward about that transaction, that Joe Biden would have a free hand on China? He's already told us China isn't competing with us. China is not a danger. I say Joe Biden is bought and paid for. Every election, and I have worked for 4 Republican presidents, every election is framed in this way. You have to be able to state in one sentence the reason why people should vote for you and not your opponent. And therefore, I would pose this as the central question of the 2020 election. Who better to rebuild America's broken economy than a man who has already proven that he knows exactly how to do it and can do it again, or a man whose prescription for the economy, higher taxes, more regulation, and more big omnibus trade deals will make the sick patient die. That is the choice for the American people. And then we need people to really understand who Joe Biden and Kamala Harris really are. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Joe Biden is the father of the 1994 crime bill. He used to call it the Biden bill. This is the law which mandates the harsh, mandatory penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use. I'm not for drug legalization. I'm for judges having discretion, but this law is a social, economic, and racist failure. It has fallen disproportionately on the shoulders of black people and poor people, and it is time to follow the president's lead in his Second Chance Act. You see, Joe Biden's drug law has destroyed families, it has destroyed lives, it has rehabilitated no one. It has cost taxpayers, if you're a conservative, billions of dollars to incarcerate and feed people who are not violent criminals. I have been a critic of the war on drugs for 30 years. I didn't stumble on this yesterday. Nixon's single greatest mistake, but let's be clear, it was turbocharged by Joe Biden and Bill Clinton, and it's time to repeal these mandatory sentences. Take, for example, the single mother of three who's struggling to support her children and is caught with a small amount of marijuana in her purse. 25 years, hard time, ridiculous. It's time to give a judge discretion in that case. Drug abuse is a public health problem. It is not a criminal justice problem. But Joe Biden still stands by this flawed legislation. He argued with a woman voter in New Hampshire about what a great success this has been, and there has been no more zealous prosecutor of this law than Kamala Harris. The only person who's incarcerated more black people running for office in 2020 other than Joe Biden is none other than former district attorney and attorney general Kamala Harris. Look at her record. She giggles when she's asked whether she ever smoked 420. What about those poor people she put away? What about those people where she argued that they should serve beyond their sentence so the state could make use of their cheap $2 a day labor? That is the real Kamala Harris. We have an obligation to contrast that with the President's Second Chance Act. It is the President who is helping those people locked in the bowels of our penal system for impossibly long sentences. You're going to hear one of them at the Republican National Convention. I would like to see the President take cannabis off of the Schedule I DEA list. I'm not calling for its legalization by this president, but I am calling for its decriminalization. It is manifestly safer than opioids. Let's be very clear about what we face. This will be an extraordinarily difficult election. Yes, I believe we are behind today, but in no poll that I have read are we so far behind that the president cannot make up that ground. First and foremost, we need debates. Like Nixon and Kennedy, I think we need 4 debates. I would not suggest to the president that he accept the proposed schedule of the Presidential Commission on Debates because it is not appointed by the president, it is not a commission, and it is most certainly not about debate. It is about limiting debate. The President of the United States is the incumbent and has the political authority to say, hey, Joe, next Thursday night, Fox News, you and I, no moderator, toe-to-toe. Let's go. Now, suddenly, you see all these big Democrats saying, oh, debates aren't that important, they really don't solve anything, they don't educate anybody, they're just memorized sound bites. Really? I can tell you exactly how much preparation Donald Trump did for his debates in 2016. I believe, worst judgment, one of them was a tie, he was the clear winner in the other two. You know how much time he spent memorizing lines? 0. Why? Because Donald Trump is the real deal. He is genuine. He's authentic. He's not a confection. He's not a fabrication of some political consultant. He is not always eloquent, but he is always articulate. You always know exactly where he stands. Now, I believe that the mainstream media has helped confuse the people about our opposition to mail-in ballots. So let me help them out. We're not opposed to absentee ballots. We are opposed, as they do in, say, Nevada, of mailing a ballot to every single registered voter in Clark County, the largest county in the state, including 200,000 ballots to people who haven't voted in at least 6 years and are most likely either dead or have moved. That is a recipe for fraud and disaster. There are 12 states who by constitution are prohibited from any kind of mail-in ballot. There are 35 states that require the showing of a photo ID. Those state laws and constitutions cannot just be swept away by some new federal law. And let me be absolutely clear. I have complete confidence in the U.S. postal system to deliver the absentee ballots in the next election as they have in every election since the beginning of time. We also face the issue of internet censorship. Laura Loomer is the only person on the face of the planet more censored than I am. I'm jealous. If you're not on Parler, get on Parler. And lastly, we have the epic distortion of the corporate-owned media. I know this firsthand because I was gagged for 16 months while CNN and MSNBC, yes, and Vice News and others poured complete invective, falsehoods, lies, conjecture, destroying my public reputation while I was not free to defend myself. It is an outrage. They try it yet again today with this new line. Stone maintained his silence to cover for Trump in return for the commutation of his sentence. There is no evidence of that whatsoever, other than the plea bargain-induced false testimony of Michael Cohen and Rick Gates, who have no corroboration and who have told different stories at different times. False. But you've got to hand it to them. They will keep recycling the same crap over and over again. Let's be very clear then about where we are. This is, as we always say, the most important election of my lifetime, but it is. This is an epic struggle between good and evil, between light and dark, between the godly and the godless. This is a struggle not just for the survival of America and the United States, but the very survival of Western civilization itself. This is an epic battle to preserve our U.S. Constitution, and we need Donald Trump to stop this country from hurtling over the cliff yet again to atheistic, godless globalism, and we need Laura Loomer and Jim Jordan in Washington to help the president. You may be seated. I only have about another 45 minutes. Let me just say in conclusion that I'm going to hang around afterwards. We will be selling the iconic Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirts that I was arrested in. We're going to be selling all of my books, including my first New York Times bestseller. But most importantly, we're going to be selling Roger Stones. This is a simple stone to which I have signed my name, making it a Roger Stone. These were not moving very well on my website until Rolling Stone and the New York Observer and several other elitist left-wing media outlets made fun of me. Last Christmas, I sold several thousand of them. This is meant solely as a paperweight. It has no other use, even though it is an exact historic replica of the very stone that little David used to take down Goliath.